Where did romance go? Sometimes I find myself wondering, where did real romance go? The kind you see in old movies, where a man would sing under a woman's window, write her handwritten letters, stand in the rain holding flowers. Not for attention, not for validation, but because being close to her really mattered. Today, everything feels different. Romance has kind of dissolved. Now it's likes, quick texts, fast dates, and even faster indifference. And I can't help but ask, what happened? Why? Why do gestures that used to mean I care now feel awkward or even mocked? Why is a man afraid to make the first move, and a woman afraid to seem vulnerable when all she really wants is warmth? Maybe it's about feminism, or equality, or maybe we're just living in a new kind of world, where the old roles no longer work. So let's talk about it. Today I want to explore with you what romance used to look like and why it worked that way. What major shifts changed everything. How feminism and women's independence reshaped emotional dynamics. Why the man is no longer the hero, and the woman no longer the princess. And most importantly, is romance still possible in the 21st century? There was a time when a man would win over a woman simply because she had no other option. She depended on him. Today, relationships are voluntary. A woman can choose to be with someone, be alone, or be with you. And for a lot of men, that's a whole new level of challenge. Romantic gestures come with emotional risk. And now, fewer men are willing to take that risk, especially when confession no longer guarantees a response. What do I mean? Let's rewind a bit. It used to be more predictable. A man makes a move, attention, a kind word, flowers. A woman responds, sometimes with interest, sometimes with a polite no, but either way, the game made sense. He initiates, she considers. Even if it didn't work out, no big deal. He tried, and that effort was respected. It was even admired. Good for him. He went for it. And most importantly, he didn't fear being laughed at just for showing feelings. You might say, but isn't it still like that? Technically, yes. But the context has changed. A lot. Back then, society backed him up. Making a move was normal. Even rejection didn't humiliate him. It kept him within the rules. Today, that same step might get labeled as pressure, awkwardness, or even creepiness. Women are free, and that's a good thing. But with that freedom came unpredictability. There's no longer an expectation that she'll be polite or even respond at all. And men, they're still afraid of being rejected, but now there's no social cushion to fall back on. Plus, there's the whole issue of public exposure. Rejection used to be private. Now it might end up in a group chat or worse, on someone's Instagram story. That adds a whole new level of fear. So yeah, technically not much has changed, but emotionally, it's a different world. Back then, romantic acts, serenades, gestures, even winning her over, were signs of strength, manliness, and social performance. The man showed what he could offer, and the woman chose. But here's the catch. A woman couldn't live without a man. That serenade, it wasn't just sweet. It was a form of status display. Why? Because she couldn't earn her own money. The whole setup was built on economic, religious, and social dependence. It all started shifting during the world wars. Men went off to fight, and millions of women had to step in, working, providing for families, taking on full responsibility. And they handled it. Women discovered strength, independence, and they didn't want to go back. Women started competing with men, not for a husband, but for careers, positions, money. That was a turning point. In the past, a man had to win a woman. Now, a woman can build her life just fine without a man, and men lost their monopoly status. The result? Everything's faster, easier. The idea of a serenade now feels too much, a little awkward. Romance gives way to convenience. Yeah, what changed because of that shift? Needing a man? No longer a given. A man making the first move. Now it's a risk, not a virtue. You take initiative. You might get called pushy or intrusive. Female expectations still exist, but they've changed. They want care and strength, without control or pressure. Men, they've lost the script. They're not sure when they're being confident and when they're toxic. Relationships became blurry, and trust got thinner. That's why romance now feels like an emotional high-stakes game, and not many people are ready to play. If we try to trace when everything started to shift, there were 3 key moments. The first wave, late 19th century, when the early women's movements emerged. And that was the era of suffragettes. Women began asking for basic things: the right to vote, to get an education, to work, instead of spending their whole lives dependent on a man. It was just the beginning, but an important one. Then came World War II, and this was the real turning point. Men went off to war, and millions of women filled their shoes. In factories, transportation, medicine. They worked, supported families, made decisions. And you know what changed? They pulled it off, and they didn't want to go back to a life where their only role was to cook and stay quiet. They felt, I can do this on my own. Then came the era from the 1970s to the 2000s. That was the rise of individualism. People started living for themselves. Career-driven women emerged. Then came the digital world, the internet, social media, constant connection. Everything sped up. There was more freedom, but with it came more uncertainty. So why does all this matter? Because women became independent, legally and financially. They no longer need to stay with a man just to survive. Men, in turn, lost their exclusive role as the provider, the hero, the one in charge. And society itself shifted. It's no longer about strict roles, like he's the breadwinner, she's the nurturer. Now it's about flexibility. Whoever can, does. And that old school romance, it simply lost its social function. Back then, a romantic gesture was a way for a man to say, I can provide for you. But now, a woman can provide for herself. That's why many of those old gestures feel either out of place or just confusing. So, here's the thing. Romance didn't exactly disappear. The world just changed. And with it, the way we express love changed too. Is female independence real today? Yes. More and more yes. In today's world, a woman can live without a husband. She can earn more than a man. She can own property, run a business, hold power. She can be an astronaut, a general, or even president. But here's what's important. It's not about rejecting men as a gender. It's about not being forced to depend on them, like women were for centuries. Romance didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It's no longer about serenades. Now it sounds more like, I remembered your favorite tea. I believe in your project. I showed up when things were hard. It's still romance, just softer, quieter, more real. Women have their own struggle too. They're learning to live in tension between the desire for freedom and the deep need for emotional connection. And men, they're learning too. Learning not to wait for clear instructions from women, but to redefine what masculinity means. Not by copying the past, but by creating something new. We're living in a transitional era, and transitions always come with inner conflict. For men today, the challenge isn't to go back to the good old days. The challenge is to rethink their place in this new world. Hard? Yes, but also meaningful and worth it. Why did classic romance disappear? Back then, the roles were clear. The woman waited. The man acted. There was a script. Now, both can act, both can say no. There's no longer a right move. So romance moved from grand gestures to quiet presence, from the outside to something deeper. These days, being romantic means being attuned, not just being wanted, but being understood. And you know what real romance looks like today? Not fireworks, not some big scene, but quiet care. When you forget about a doctor's appointment and someone gently reminds you. When your phone dies and someone silently brings the charger. When you walk in the door and there's your favorite bread on the table, not because you asked, because the one who loves you remembered. That's the new serenade. No guitar, no stage, but it hits exactly where it matters. Respecting boundaries. It's not I'll win you over. It's I hear you, and I won't push. That kind of safety doesn't make feelings weaker. It makes them deeper. Vulnerability. When someone isn't afraid to say, I missed you. I was scared of losing you. I feel lost without your warmth. Romance in the 21st century isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. Digital sincerity. A voice message where you can hear their breath. A simple, I thought of you when I saw this tree. A playlist made just for your mood. The world may be digital, but feelings, they're still very real. Only now they travel through a screen instead of a balcony. And honestly, people are tired. Tired of empty gestures, scripted feelings, and smiles that never reach the heart. That's why modern romance is quiet, true, and deeply personal. What does it mean to be a romantic man today? It's not about winning. It's about noticing, not waiting for a signal, but daring to care first. Not making grand gestures, but doing small ones that actually matter. Paying attention, knowing what she loves, sensing when she's scared, being able to sit in silence without trying to fix everything. Just being there, really there. In the 21st century, a romantic man isn't the one who conquers, but the one who feels. The biggest shift? Back then, a woman waited. Today, she participates. She's no longer just the one being pursued. She's an equal voice in the emotional dialogue. And with that shift comes new expectations, new roles, and new complications too. So, what does a romantic woman look like in the 21st century? First of all, she's not afraid to go first. She texts him first. She asks how he's feeling. She says, "Want to meet up?" without waiting for him to ask. Because she knows, taking the first step doesn't make her less feminine. It makes her real. Real connection is built on mutuality. Not games, not waiting, not keeping score. Second, she knows how to care. Not out of duty, but from the heart. She makes tea because she noticed he's coming down with something. She gently says, "You seem quiet today. Is everything okay?" She's not trying to carry everything, not trying to fix or save. She just shares warmth, honestly, quietly. Because caring isn't weakness, it's emotional maturity. Third, she's honest. No guessing games. She says it out loud. "I like you," or "I felt hurt. I needed more of your attention." And you know what? That's rare these days. Real honesty, emotional, gentle, clear, is its own kind of love. She doesn't expect him to do everything, but she knows how to appreciate what he does. She can buy the tickets herself. But if he pays for dinner, she'll say thank you. Not because she has to, because she values the gesture. For her, care isn't about obligation. It's about choice. And that's the point. Independence doesn't cancel gratitude. And finally, she doesn't judge. She supports. She doesn't expect him to be a hero all the time. She doesn't laugh at his doubts. She gives him space to just be, with his fears, his silence, his off days. Because men today often feel lost. And a woman who knows how to stand with him, not above him. She's not just a partner. She's his anchor, his rare treasure. What kind of conflict can show up? Sometimes independence comes with a hidden cost. Distance. Not because a woman can't be in a relationship, but because she doesn't want to feel dependent on anyone. So what happens? Deep down, she might believe, I don't owe anyone anything. I've got this on my own. She might pull back emotionally, afraid vulnerability looks like weakness. She might hope for a man who's old-school romantic, strong, attentive, thoughtful, but she doesn't always show up with the same warmth in return, and that's where disappointment kicks in, on both sides, because the man starts thinking, I'm giving and giving, but getting nothing back. At some point, he starts to wonder, is this still romance, or is it just service with no soul? Modern romance doesn't ask a woman to be quiet or play helpless. It asks her to be emotionally mature and capable of giving. You can be strong and still be soft. You can be independent and still offer warmth. That's what real 21st century romance looks like. Because modern romance, it's not always picture perfect. It's not as obvious. You have to feel, not just act. You have to be vulnerable, not just strong. You have to connect, not win. Yes, romance has changed. But if someone remembers which tea you love, that might mean even more than someone singing under your window ever did. Though, serenades aren't completely off the table. Just maybe give her a heads up so she can emotionally prepare for the show. What's changed? Old romance could be performed, even without feeling a thing. New romance doesn't work without authenticity. Now, both are equal. Both give. Both feel. Romance isn't dead. It just stopped being a show. Now it's something quieter, deeper, and way more real. Yes, feminism, independence, and equality have changed everything. But not by destroying romance, by rewriting the code. She's no longer the prize. He's no longer the only one making the moves. Romance is now a two-way street, and it demands way more emotional maturity than before.